Hello guys, welcome back. In this part, we are going to work on the server side of our app. So as you can see, my client side of the app is almost done and everything is working as expected. Now let's work on the server side. So before I start, like on the server side, I just want to quickly walk you through what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the Node.js framework, the JavaScript runtime engine at the server side. At the server side, and then at the database level I'm going to use MySQL, and I think there's another couple of other frameworks like Express framework that sits on the top of the Node.js. I'm going to make use of that. So basically, the most what I'm going to use is Node.js and MySQL. Other things are just like a couple of other npm packages, the helper packages I will be using. So let's get started. Okay, so first thing first, as you can see in my app, I have a GPS mobile tracker. That was my client. Let's open a new command prompt window here. Okay, let me do an ls. Let me go to the server side. Let me go to the app directory. Here I'm just going to create a new directory called server. Okay, now let's cd into that server. Right now this server is blank. And the first thing, I assume you already have an installation of Node.js. So all you need to do is node-v. If you do not have the node installed, just go to the node.js and grab a package of the node. Okay, perfect. So now next thing is all you need to do inside the directory is like say npm init. So what this will do, it will create a brand new package. And it will create a like vanilla Node.js application here. So that's all I need for this at this point of time. So as you can see, I'm going to choose the default package name server. Version number is 1.0. Description is just say GPS, whatever you want to put here. GPS mobile tracker app server side server. Okay, entry points is index.js. It's your choice. Usually some people call it like server.js. I prefer to just use app.js. It doesn't matter, just like you can do whatever you want. You can so keywords, author, I'm going to put my name here. License, I prefer the MIT style license, and just review the information one last time. Let's put the yes. Basically, and as you can see, it will create a blank new directory here, and you will see the package.json here. Let me go to this package. So right now there is nothing in this. Now I need to install a couple of the packages. Okay, so I already these are the packages I'm going to install. Let me type this command here first. Okay, so npm install -- save, that means is going to include all these packages in my package.json file. I will need nodemon. Again, once I start using this, you will understand why I'm choose to have these npm packages. But nodemon is basically if you every time you make a change to app.js or any file in your node file, you don't want to restart your server. So it's just like it is going to watch the file changes, and you don't need to restart the server every time. Okay, that's basically the only contribution it is doing. Express is the middleware framework. Again, it will be used for the routing. I will cover this in detail, but just for now, like another packages I'm going to use a .env. .env is like it creates an environment file. Usually the good practice is always save all your if you have some confidential information like Jwt token or your server MySQL user ID and password, instead of hard coding into your into your server packages like app.js, it's always a good idea to create those in .env file. Let me quickly show you an example here. So if you go to the server, see, I always create a .env file. So all your confidential information like DB username, password, host name, etc., everything, always try to put that in one file and call it an environment file here. Okay, so let's go .env. Next thing is course. Course is again, it's a cross origin request. You obviously do not want every other internet website to, access your server. So course is going to establish some secure connection. Next thing you will need is the body parser. Body parser is another npm packages which will, it will help you to fetch. Suppose you are making a GET request or a POST request from the client side. So it will help you fetch the, get and post parameters. Again, once you will see this in action, it will make more sense. So next thing is I'm going to use is bcrypt. So now what bcrypt does, actually, so whenever, suppose you are storing somebody's password into user ID and password to your database, it's never a good idea to store password directly. It's always a good idea to encrypt those password and use, store those encrypted password inside your database. So in case, like, if your database is hacked or it's salted, people shouldn't see that. People shouldn't see the passwords, like raw password. And again, it's a good practice. If I find out that you are storing my password in your database, I'll be really very upset without any encryption. Obviously, you have to store the password, but if you are storing it without an encryption, that's really a bad practice. Next thing I will need is JSON Web Token. Again, JSON Web Token, you will understand, like, I'm using the JSON authorization and authentication method here. So that's all I will need. And last but not the least, like, I will need MySQL packages. So MySQL will allow you to connect your Node.js to MySQL database. I think that's pretty much it. So if I need something else, I'll come back and install it. I'm going to pause my recording here and wait for this to install. And then once this is installed, I will resume my recording. Thank you. Okay, so now all my npm packages are installed. As you can see, body parser, course.env, MySQL, NodeMon, and everything. So the next thing is I'll go back to my package.json file. As you can see, I have no method to call NodeMon. So I'm just going to include to my scripts here. What I'm going to include here is say start. And then I will issue the command nodemod app.js. So next time I do run the npm start, what it's going to do is going to call the nodemon and is going to monitor any changes inside this directory. Let me save this one. Let me go back to a command prompt window, and once I'm inside the server directory, just type npm start. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, it's going to call this command nodemon app.js. Okay, now let's come out of this one. Inside the server directory, I'm going to create a new file. It's called .env. Okay, and then I'm going to create another new file called app.js. As you can see, two blank files I'm going to create, .env and .app.js. So let's go, and as I mentioned earlier, .env is where I'm going to put all the confidential information. So right now there is nothing confidential, but I'm just going to put something called port equals to 3000. So let me save this one. Now let's go back to app.js. So first thing I'm going to write here, let's include the express package to our app.js. So I'm going to define a constant express equals to require express. Next thing is I'm going to define another constant and assign this express to that constant. Third thing is I'm going to require the .env package. So remember, like, .env is the package which will allow you to access the .env file. Right now I'm just like including that into my package, bare minimum. So next thing is let's go create an app.use. So what is app.use is going to do is going to initialize that express package and is going to listen to that, this is the routing. Right now is a blank routing, and whatever the request comes to this one, app.use is going to send a message, is going to reply back with a message saying welcome GPS mobile tracker app user. And the last thing I will need is app.listen, and is going to listen to that process.env.port. So remember, this port is coming from the environment file. So that's what, like, is referring to that port. That's what, like, I don't want to hard code the port number into my app.js. So that's why I've written separately into .env file, and I'm calling this here. And whatever comes in, as you can see, is going to say this is the what you will see in your terminal server. Okay, so let me save this. Let me run this one. You will see. See, this is like Elish Enterprise server is already on the localhost 3000. So this is the message actually. See that? Okay. And now let's go open in another command prompt window and say localhost 3000. So go to localhost 3000 Beautiful. See, okay, so now we are going to work on our rest of the app.js file. First thing before we start, if you remember, I installed a npm package called course. So what course is actually, it blocks any unauthorized website. If somebody is trying to access to your website, it will block those websites. So let me show you how. Okay. So first thing you will need, let me go to the environment file, and I'm going to create a variable. It's called allowed origin, and I will assign like couple of website addresses which are allowed origins. So basically, these are the only websites which will be allowed to access my server. So make sure, if you once you host your application, make sure that you keep your application into this allowed origin, otherwise it's not going to work. So let's go to app.js. Next thing I want to do here, as you can see, I will define a constant and call this a course module here. I'm going to put some comments and put the entire block related to the course inside this comments box here. Okay. So I'm going to call this allowed origin, and as you can see, it's going to access that environment file. It will take the entire string, and it will split all the domains separated by a comma. As you can see, all of these different domains are separated by commas here. Okay, so that's exactly what it's doing. Okay, next thing is I'm going to define app.useCourse, and I'm going to pass that origin to this one. So basically what this function is going to do is going to only allow this origin what I have listed into my environment file. That's pretty much it. Okay, so, and if you want to avoid that, I'm going to show you one piece of another code. Just say app.useCourse and do not pass anything. So basically, if you have to use one of these, either using this or you're using this. So if you're using this, that means it will allow every website on the internet or anybody to access to your server, which obviously you do not want. But for the development purpose, I think it's okay to do that. Okay. So that's pretty much on the code side. Now let's go. So I will go back to my client side of the app. So if you remember, there was a method like sign up method. It was like set user method, and I was calling a method on the backend service which set us a new account. So let's go back to that set user method here. Okay. So if you remember, in my set user method, I created a fake response, and I was passing an observable, and responding, replying to my client side app with the fake response. Now it is time to replace it with the real server code. So I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to put all these fake responses inside this comment box here. Next thing, I want to have an HTTP option. So HTTP option is like, it's basically HTTP header. Whenever you are sending something to the server, it has, server expects a couple of HTTP option, like, what kind of request it is. So basically content type is equals to application.json content type. And you can pass any authorization variables here. In this case, I'm passing token here. So let me show you in 1 minute what this token is. Okay. So again, I'm just going to call the HTTP method from the HTTP client and pass this variable I'm trying to access, which is localhost 3000 and sign up. Okay. So as you can see, I'm passing my HTTP options here, and I'm passing the form data. That means the user ID and login or whatever the form you want to pass here. I'm passing the data like this. Okay. As you can see, it's giving me a couple of errors. So let me quickly fix that. First, let me define what token is. So token is basically, I'm just defining a local, is a local variable here. Is getting the token from the local storage, and if the local storage has the token, if it doesn't have the token, just pass any random value ABCD. It's not going to do any harm. I'm passing the dummy token because at the server side, I'm going to validate this token. So now, like as you can see, I've got two more errors here, HTTP header and HTTP. That's because I have not imported the HTTP header and HTTP client here. So let me quickly do that. Okay, let me import that. And next thing is I have to replace my constructor. So I'm going to say private HTTP and HTTP client. As you can see, all the errors are gone. So basically that's all it is. All it takes to to call the real server here. Let me save this file. Now let's go back to my app.js file. So now my app.js file, as you can see, my client is trying to access this URL, which is localhost 3000 and sign up. So again, once you deploy it to the real server, you have to replace it with the real, like suppose you are deploying it on the Heroku, so you have to give the Heroku server path, and I will include a link to that. I have another video where I have shown, like, you know, how you can deploy your Node.js app to Heroku. So I'll include that link here. Okay, but basically, you know, this is the link which will access your server. Okay, so let's go back to the app.js. Okay. Next thing is, as you can see, I commented one of this one because I'm going to use this other feature. Now I'm just going to define my app routes here. So make sure your app routes, whatever you define, it has to be before this one. If you put it after this, it's not going to work. Okay. So and I'm going to create an application Jsonparser. So let me define an Jsonparser here. Okay. So there are two different methods. Let me just first type this one. One is the JSON parser and other is the URL encoded parser. I'm going to use only one of this one, but let me show you what I mean by that. If you remember, here I put the content type equals to application JSON. So if your client is using content type equals to application JSON, then your server should also make use of this thing. Okay, say JSON parser. Okay, so here I'm saying app.post, and I'm defining a route here which is sign up. So basically this is going to match this localhost 3000 and sign up. So, and again, as you can see, content type is application JSON. Here I'm saying app.post sign up, and it takes a JSON parser here. Okay, and then I'm going to define a function here. Okay, basically right now I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to say do something here. That's pretty much it, I think. Yeah. So now let's fix our sign up route here. And I'm going to put more materials here. But before I do that, as you can see, I included the body parser, but I forgot to include that body parser here. So let me just include that in. Okay, so constant body parser equals to body parser. Next thing is, let me, before I do that, so I want to include a couple of the validation. So what validations are? So suppose your client side is accessing this URL, that localhost colon 3000 and sign up URL, but your client request doesn't have any request object. That means they pass the null value. So in that case, like, I know that on the client side we are always handling the null values, we are putting the validation there, but it's also a very great idea to handle those null values or all the validations on the server side as well. So I'm going to put some validation rules here. So I'm going to code all of those things here inside this validation. So on the left hand side, as you go to the server directory, as you can see, I created one folder called validators, and inside that validators I created a file called validate.js. Similarly, I'm creating one more folders, models, and inside that models I'm creating two different files, connector.js, dbconnection.js. So what these things are, I'll talk about these files in a minute. First, just let's focus on the validate.js. So on the validate.js, what I want to do, I want to handle all the null values or the invalid values coming from the client side. So let's go back to the app.js. I'm going to first include this validate.js. Again, as you can see, validate.js is inside that validator folder. So I'm just going to include that, and I'm going to include that in a val function constant. Okay. Next step is I'm going to call a couple of functions on the val functions here. So for example, this val functions is going to go to the validate.js file and is going to call a function called check input data null. And basically that's pretty much is going to do. So let's go first work on our validate.js file. So in validate.js file, suppose here the objective is I want to check if the input request has any null values or not. So first, I'm going to define a new variable. It's called results not found. Again, as you can see, it's a JSON object, and it's simply saying error code equals to 0. That means there is an error. Error message equals to server error. You can put any server error, any error you like. Okay. So again, if you don't know, what those things are, so if you remember, it has to exactly match with the client side request. So if you remember my client side tutorial, okay, let me quickly see. This is the object response I was responding. So my client is expecting an object from server which looks like this. So error code equals to 1, error message. Again, it's totally up to you, whatever data you want to pass. But this is the, this is what I created. So I want to, I'm expecting my server to return this kind of data object here. Okay. So error code, again, is totally up to you as the convention. I'm saying if error code equals to 0, that means there is an error. If error code is equals to 1, that means there is no error. It's successful. So it says 0 here. So let's go to the validate.js. I'm saying, okay, let's create a variable. It says there is an error, and it's that means there is 0, and you can put any error here. So you can hard code the string, usually put some text message here. Okay, perfect. Next thing is, again, as you saw, I'm calling a function called check input data null. So let's create these things here. Okay, I'm going to say module.exports. And inside that module.exports, I'm going to create a function called check input data null. So what it does, it takes the request object here, and then it says if request.body is equals to null, that means if there's no body in the request, just send this result back. That's all it is doing. So it's checking for the null values here. Okay, it's very simple function here. Okay, now while I'm here, I want to create a couple of other functions. Okay, so basically you can have as many validation functions as you want. So I'm going to create a couple of more. This is, say, check input data quality. Again, you can have, suppose I'm checking for the input mail. So suppose, remember, if your user put the email and the password, and there is no email, that means there's no user ID. So if the user.body request.body.input email equals to blank, then just return that result not found. Okay. Now, this is the way to manipulate. So this is the standard object I'm returning. But this time, if this validation fails, I want to pass another message. So as you can see, all I'm doing here, I'm taking the same variable, but I'm updating the error message here. And this time I'm going to say there is no data submitted from client. So basically the objective is reuse the same object, and just, instead of defining the whole thing over and over again inside these functions, I just defined it once, and I'm just updating the error message property. And I'm saying, okay, this time the error message is this, but everything else is the same. The error code equals to 0, row count equals to 0, data is blank, but the message is saying there is no data submitted from the client. So again, as the objective is you can have as many as data validation functions as you want. Okay. This is just the sample methods. Okay. Now I want to create one more. Remember, if the token is not there. So now let's talk about the Jwt token. So here I'm going to create another method for token authentication here. Okay. So check Jwt token. So I'm creating this method. Again, it's very similar to the method. It's a little bit more complicated here. First thing is checking the token. And if you remember, token from the client side, I'm passing the token at the header level. So HTTP option and token equals to token. So I have to get that token from the headers. Okay, request.headers token. And if there is no token, I want to get out of this and say with an error saying, okay, you know what? There's no token, so there's an error. Now, if the token is there, then you have to verify that token, and you verify the token with this secret. Now again, you can hard code your password here. It's not a very good idea. So I'm going to keep this password to my environment file. Okay. And basically if it fails, you say your token is not valid. Please log off and log on again. That's pretty much it. So again, it's a very simple method. That's how you check your Jwt token. One thing I'm missing in this file, let me import the Jwt. So I'm going to import the Jwt here. Basically that's it. So that's pretty much it. Okay, that's all you need on your validate.js file. So here, as you can see, now next thing is so I'm going to comment this out. As you can see, because when on the sign up method, you do not need check the Jwt token. Jwt token is only required when you are doing some updates or setting or saving location. Even on the login method or create user method, you don't need that because user is not signed in yet. Once user is signed in, then only you check the Jwt token. Otherwise, there is no need. So next thing is, let's create the database connection. So on the sign up method, I'm going to, similar to that validate.js, I have created another folder. As I mentioned, there are two files, connector.js and dbconnection.js, and I will go through this in 1 minute. First, as you can see, similar to that, I'm including that here, and in variable, I'm just calling out that method from the connection. So create user is the method which which actually is going to make connection to my SQL server here. Okay. So let's go work on our create. So first thing is, as you can see, these are all the MySQL npm packages. So if you remember, I did an npm install on MySQL. If you're wondering where I got all this information from, so just go to npm.js, npmjs.com, and look for this MySQL packages, and you will find all the information you will need to access MySQL inside the Node.js. Here, as you can see, there are a couple of methods to make connections. One is like, this is the ideal way, but I like instead of using the connection.query, I prefer to use connection.pool, because pool is little bit better method of handling SQLs here. Again, totally up to you. As you can see, this here there are lots of methods, lot of different examples they have given. So totally, just decide what's best for your app and go with that one. Okay. Here, what I'm going to do here, first let me make connection. So where MySQL equals to require MySQL. Next step is I'm going to create a pool, MySQL.create pool. And inside that pool, I'm going to pass the connection parameters, which are like host, username, password, database. So again, instead of hard coding all those values here, let me go to the environment file and say db host. Here in this, again, I'm defining the different variables to store my user ID and password and host name and strings, everything inside the environment file. So if you remember, there's one more Jwt secret. So this is where I store my Jwt secret file, the secret password here. So all my connections, instead of hard coding those inside the files, I've kept it here. Now let's go to the connector.js, and as you can see, host is equals to this. It's going to the environment file and is fetching the real host name, username, and password from those files here. Perfect. Okay. Last thing I will need here, very basic. Now just create the pool.get connection, and if there is an error, throw out the error. Otherwise, just do the module.exports and export the pool variable here. Okay. Now, as you can see, all my connections are inside this file. From all I need to do, just include this connection, connector.js, anywhere I want to make connection, and then start using that. That's it. Okay. I could have combined this file with the DB connection, but I just it's a better idea to split your code and keep all the connection related stuff in one file. Okay. Now let's go start working on the connection, the real connection where I'm going to use the create user method. Okay. Now before I do that, I want to go back to MySQL. So here at this point, you will need a database. So I have a database, MySQL. Again, it's not a database tutorial, so I'm not going to show you how to install and create, how to work on your MySQL. So at this point, I assume you already have a MySQL somewhere. In my case, I have this MySQL running on the GoDaddy. So as you can see, this is my MySQL server here. At this point, you will need two different tables. One is user table, other one is user GPS table. So for this app, as you can see, user table, it has these fields: name, email, password, question, answer, and these two dates. And email is the primary key. Please do not if this is not the primary key, if you forget about this, my app is not going to work. So this table user should look exactly like this. And the second table is user GPS. It will look like this. Here I have defined the two different keys, email and the created it. Okay. So in case if you are interested, if you have trouble, I have included, if you go to my README, you can, go to my GitHub repository, and I have included this MySQL code here. So you can just use this code to create these two tables here. Okay. But at this point, I expect you to have these two tables, user and user GPS. Okay. Now let's go start working on our app. So let's go to the dbconnection.js. Here remember the pool I created here. So all of these connections I created. So I'm going to call this variable inside my connection. That's the first thing I need. Okay. Next thing is I'm going to create two different variables here. Just like validator.js, I'm going to create two different variables, results not found and results found. As you can see, they're very similar, but here I'm saying one is says operation not successful and this is operation successful. This is with the generic error code. And as we write more specific codes, I will manipulate these variables here and I will start sending those in the result. Okay. Next thing is, let's go create some methods here. So module.exports. Okay, so remember here I'm working on the first method, says sign up. So I am creating my first method called create user. Okay, so let's go create this method create this function called create user. So create user is a function. It takes a request object and returns a response. Okay, now inside that create user, next thing I want to do, remember that pool.get connection. So pool is already out there. Okay, so I'm just going to make a connection to the pool.get connections here. Okay, and inside that pool connection, so now I have established connection to my SQL database. First thing I want to do, if there is an error. So if there is an error, just throw out the message saying not connected and get out of this one. Okay. Second thing is, so whenever you are done, okay, you always release the connection. So as here you can see, when done with the connection, just release it. Say connection.release. And yes, again, it's a good idea to throw the error. In case if you have any error, just throw out the error. Okay, that's, let me fix this column. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, I created a pool connection. I got a new connection. If there is an error, I throw out the error. And when I am done, I'm just throwing out, like saying I'm releasing the connection. Everything, whatever I'm going to do, it's going to happen inside in this, between these two statements. Okay, so let's go create that one. Next thing is, I'm going to create a variable saying insert into user. So if you're like, I assume you guys are familiar with the SQL. So the way you do an insert to a table is you say insert into table name and set, and then you sort the values here. So that's exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so where SQL looks like this one, I'm going to create another variable called var values, and var values, as you can see in my user table, I'm expecting name, email, password, question, answer, created date, and updated date. Okay, these are the 7 fields here. So all these 7 fields, as you can see, name is coming from the request object, that means from the client side. Similar, email is coming from that one. Password is hash. I'll come back to password in 1 minute. Okay, created date and updated at. So it's a good idea to create a new date variable here and capture those things here. Okay, now next step is, so again, I will come back to the password in 1 minute. Okay, but before I do that, I just want to quickly finish that, what this function is going to look like. Okay, next step is, now let's use the connection. So connection.query, and you pass this variable here, say SQL and then values, and that's pretty much it. That's how you run a SQL against your MySQL database through Node.js. This is as simple as that. Okay, now next thing is, let me close this one. Okay, inside this one, again, check the error. If there is an error, so what could be the error? So for example, again, if there is an error, I want you to pass a message here. So remember that, error result not found. Here I was saying operation not successful, but I will pass the same variable, but here I will say email ID already exists. So, there are different methods you can capture the SQL errors, but here I'm just assuming that, it's not able to, it's connecting to the database. When you, what happens, like, if there's a value already exists, it's going to throw up an error saying, okay, email already exists. So you can have, as you can hard code the error, or like, depending on your error, you can pass that message accordingly. Okay. Next thing is, now if there is no error, I need to result that. I need to send that results not found variable into the res objects. Okay. Now, if there is no error, then just say everything is okay. So operation successful. Okay. Basically, that's pretty much it. That's all, So now if I execute this, from the client, it's going to, it will be able to create a new create user object. That means it will create a new user into this table. That's pretty much it. Okay. Now let's talk about the password. Okay. This is a special case. That's why I have chosen like this. So I remember, like when in the beginning, I said it's never a good idea to store somebody's password in raw form in your database table. Okay. Always use some kind of encryption. So this is, if you go to my package.json file, if you see, I installed a package called bcrypt. Okay, again, if you want to know what bcrypt is, just go to npm website, npmjs.org, npm.js, and here you type bcrypt. A lot of people use passport.js, anything, even passport.js. I have no preference, it will do the same thing. I just happen to use bcrypt in this app. Okay, so let's go to the bcrypt. What bcrypt does, it takes your password and it encrypts that and it stores a encrypted version. That's all it is doing. Okay, so again, you can find how to use that bcrypt here. I'm just going to make use of it. So basically, all you need to do here, this block, I'm going to keep it inside. Let me show you how. Okay, so I'm going to say bcrypt.hash, and is going to take the input password, what's coming from the input, and is going to encrypt that. That's all it is going to do. Okay, this function, that's all it's going to do. Okay, so let me wrap all of this entire block into this one. Okay, perfect. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. As you can see, so here the only exception is everything else will be the same, but here only exception, because this contains a password, I kept it like this. Okay, so that's how actually basically you make connections to your MySQL and do an insert operation. Okay, now similar to this, so this is for the sign up method. Okay, now let's see. I'm going to create one more. So there are other routes too. This is like, for example, login. Okay, so as you can see, I copy pasted the entire thing here. Okay, it's almost everything else is same. The only difference is instead of create user, I'm calling login user. Okay, now let's go create the login user method here. So login user is going to look exactly like this. Okay, and you see inside that module exports, you can just put a comma and you can have as many functions as you want. So here I'm going to do a copy paste, say login user. Okay, I'll get rid of this one. So basically login user is very similar. See, same concept. Everything is the only the body, body part in between is going to change. Okay, here earlier the SQL was insert into, here the SQL is going to be select star from user table where email is like this, and then you take the values, basically you do the error validation. If the results is not blank, you say user ID not found. Basically depending on your SQL, I'm not going to go through each and every line here, but basically depending on the user and error, you pass the message. Now the only difference is here you can see my password actually in the database is encrypted now because I use the bcrypt. The only difference is here I'm going to instead of doing the direct comparison, I'm going to do bcrypt.compare. So this is just the reverse of this bcrypt here. Here bcrypt, what it was doing, it was hashing your password. Here it is unhashing the password. That's the only difference. So otherwise everything else is same. Okay. Now one more very hidden method here, what I've done. So suppose if result is true, suppose user ID and passwords matches. So here I am creating a new token. So if you remember, like we talked about, it's very important to, pay attention to this one. You can just use this code as is. Basically the token, I'm going to create a new token, and the way to create a new token is jwt.sign. That's the very simple method here, and you pass inside whatever you want to put it here. So again, when the password is validated, you return the results to the user. Never return the password back. Always return. It's never a good idea to even show user that this was your password. So always encrypt that. So actually, as a matter of fact, I'm returning back with a token. I will never return a password. Password never leaves my server. Okay, so basically that's how you generated var token here, and that's what you throw that out. Now going back to that loop, if the results was not true, that means it was false. You say incorrect password. As simple as that. Okay, these are the two hardest to understand, these two methods, create user and login user. And once you look into the code, you sit down and take a deeper look into the code, you will understand what I'm doing here. Rest of the methods are very, very easy. So similar to the login user, I'm going to create one more method here. Here, this is a get user. Okay, so get user, as you can see, is the simplest. Here, there is no JWT token here, nothing like that here. Okay, but remember, get user. So here, let me create get user is this method, but here, as you can see, You can have as many routes as you want. Everything else will be the concept will be the same. Okay, concept will be the same everywhere. So there are a couple of other methods, say user or update user. Sorry, I'm not going to go through each and every one because the methods are same. Sometimes validation is there, validation is not there. It depending on what kind of route that is. So for example, if the update user, that means you are using you're updating your email, user ID and password. Here you need to validate the input data equals to null or not, input data quality. You also need to validate the token. So here I'm calling the token here, and if everything is valid, then only you go and update the user. Okay. So let me finish this out. You can find, and there are a couple of other routes here, set location, and I believe get location. Basically that's pretty much it. So let's go to backend. See, I'll go to my client side service here. Let me just quickly replace everything. So here, as you can see, I commented out all of those. So for example, get user location. Earlier I was passing this fake object here. All I did, I got rid of this one, and I'm going to route it to my real production server here. Okay, again, depending when you do the actual hosting, this part will change, but everything else will remain the same. Okay, basically all of these routes, as you can see, is very simple to now go back to your client side and make the corrections here, and I believe immediately you will be able to see the results. Okay. Okay, now I think I need a couple of more methods here. So I have got create user, login user, get user. Similar to this one, you see, very simple, similar, 99% same concept. You define an SQL, you define the value, you take the connection, you run your SQL and values here, get the results, and depending on the results, if the something is, you send the error message. You send the result object depending on the whether the operation was successful or not successful. Okay, so let me copy paste the other methods here. Say get location. I believe set location. Yeah, set location, get location, update user. So get user, everything is out there. Okay, perfect. So I think that's pretty much it. You can find all of these things all of this code here. Again, I just updated to the latest version. And I'm going to do a final check and update all of these things here. But basically, as you can see, if you go to these files here, you will find each and every line what I've written here in this GitHub repository. I think that's pretty much it. That completes this app. So hopefully you like it. Leave your comments if you have any issues, anything like that. Don't leave your comments on YouTube if you have any issues. Rather, just come back to this GitHub repository, go to the issues and open new issues. So this way, I can just address all of your issues very quickly here. Stay tuned. I'll be posting more videos related to the new app I'm working on, and hopefully you're going to like it. Thank you very much.